Today's podcast is brought to you by Funny Bone Broth, now available at Italy and McEwen's in the TD Center. Or you can visit them at funnybonebroth.com.
In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast. My name is Ben Grant, joined again by JB. How you doing, JB?
I'm well. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's, the situation has made it a little bit difficult, but, we'll do our best with what we've got working remotely, and, hopefully we can put something somewhat entertaining and somewhat informative together.
Yeah, I mean, the bar is low these days.
True.
For entertainment, which I think is...
And for us to begin with.
Well, I mean, I think the low quarantine bar is something that really works for us.
Yeah.
And, all kidding aside, I think it'd be nice to try and have a little distraction. For me, I appreciate it, and hopefully anybody who's listening does.
Sounds good. So we got the draft coming up on Thursday. I want to take a look first at positions of need. We're going to focus obviously on the Argos. I don't really care about anybody else. But we'll look at our positions of need first, and maybe kind of see if we can kind of figure out the Argos strategy, or maybe the way we would play it going into the draft. And then after that, we'll maybe break down some guys that I think that I hope the Argos are interested in, that I would like to see the Argos draft, and see what we can make of that. But the CFL draft is so tough. It is such a difficult thing to predict, to mock, to even to go through the risk of drafting players that may have garnered some NFL attention. So it is a little bit of a mixed bag of. It is a little bit of a mess. So we'll see what we can do with it. So for positions of need, what are you thinking? When you look at this roster, you look at the depth charts that we looked at before. Where are the holes that stand out to you?
Well, I think looking back at our conversations and what feels like a different universe, offensive line, I think, is clearly an area that you can never have too much depth in.
We still don't really know what's going on at center, and we've got guys that we like at tackle, but that are still pretty unproven.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with a new quarterback running a new offense, it's one thing for a vet who might be able to, guile his way around not a perfect offensive line. I think that you're going to want to build this line because the decision-making and the plays are just not going to be as crisp the first time through. So I think protection really matters. I mean, it's you need better protection with a new quarterback.
And I would say that so I think offensive line is still the biggest need for this draft, and I think it's a place that we can fill a few holes too. Typically, you have a lot of Canadians on the offensive line. There's some really good candidates this year in the draft, so that's an area I think the Argos are going to focus on. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few of their draft picks spent on O-linemen. I would be pretty surprised if we saw any defensive backs or even defensive linemen drafted, although there's a couple I like. But you kind of look at this roster, we've got a billion good defensive backs.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a best player available scenario, but I can't. I mean, it goes to your draft philosophy. Are you a pure best player available? There is kind of an expression or an aphorism about never drafting for need or not drafting for a position, but I would love to see them kind of double down here. Personally, that's the kind of philosophy I like, that rather than a kind of scatter shot, you can't solve all your problems in one draft.
See, I think with the CFL draft, you do have to draft for need to a degree. as opposed to BPA, because you need to draft where your Canadians that you're drafting will start or have a chance to start, have a chance to be on the field, because otherwise, what's the point? So I think that does it doesn't really eliminate best player available entirely, but for us to draft a defensive back, even if he's really good, well, is he going to get on the field? And there's looking at some of these guys, there are a couple good defensive backs in the draft, but I think they'd be really hard pressed to pass just about anybody that we've got penciled in starting. Even projected over a few years. So that may not be an area that you want to spend some draft picks, even if you believe that they are better football players than maybe some linemen that we do need that would start.
I agree. I mean, I think for me, I would be really happy in the draft if we just drafted offensive linemen and linebackers.
Yeah, and those are my two areas. Like we've got a ton of linebackers as well, but there's a lot less certainty there. Like you look at our linebackers, we've basically got like 15 guys if you're talking about a cover backer as well. But do we know what we have in any of them? Like a few, I know what Lacombo is. I know what Aki is. If we're talking about cover backer, I know what Woods is.
It's an old position. I mean, I think linebacker needs to get younger. If you look at our roster,
and the young guys we have, we really don't know much about. The other position that is a little bit like linebacker for me, and that's another spot that I wouldn't mind seeing the Argos take a player or two, is receiver. And the reason for that is that we've got a lot of really good receivers, but again, a little bit like linebacker, I don't know what some of these guys are gonna look like on the Canadian field. We've got a lot of Americans that we brought in. Like we know what a Jay is, we know what Breskison is, but the rest of the guys, I guess we know what Worthy is too. But then everyone else that we've got here, we don't know what they're gonna look like. We think they'll be good, but wouldn't it be nice if we had a couple more guys to look at in camp, or a couple of Canadian guys specifically? Like we've already got 2 Canadians penciled in as starters in the receiving corps, maybe potentially a third if we ever add TJ Jones, or if he ends up being Canadian. And what if we could add a fourth? What if you could have 4 Canadian receivers starting on your offense? Like think about the kind of liberties you could take elsewhere on the football field if you've got 4 starting wideouts as Canadians. So I think there's an opportunity there too.
Yeah, we talked about that. I mean, I think the kind of money balling or the 2% outlier, I think that's great. I think they should definitely look for an edge like that where there is you can take advantage of the positional rules, right? And try and gain a competitive advantage. I think that would be great. Even if it doesn't work, I would love to see them at least trying to game the system.
So we're agreed, no DBs, no running backs, no quarterbacks. Maybe.
No, I know.
You're not going that far?
I wouldn't say no running backs. I know you love your 2013 NFL All-Stars.
Oh, yeah, okay, but I in this draft, like, do you see anyone in this draft as a running back that's going to surpass the guys that we've got? That's the thing. Like, I'm not saying we're set at running back, but I just don't think the answer is in this draft class.
No, I agree. I think the strength. I mean, I think the strength is in offensive line, which is good, and there are a couple of linebackers who I'm excited about.
All right, well, why don't we take a look at some guys? Like I've highlighted 10 guys that in particular that I'm really interested in. Now we picked second in the first round, which is a little unfortunate because to me, looking at it, and I think everyone that I've read and talked to kind of sees there as being a huge gap between the number 1 player and everybody else, and that's Jordan Williams from East Carolina. Funny story on him too. Like I guess last year Ottawa took a look at him and they didn't realize that he would classify as a Canadian or qualify as a Canadian. because he hasn't lived in Canada. He's not from Canada, but his mom is Canadian. And so instead of signing him last year, because if they'd signed him last year, he would have signed as an American and he would have been stuck for his career as an American player. And so by sitting out for the full year, now he ends up being eligible as a Canadian player. And this is huge because he's a really, really good linebacker. So I think no matter who picks first is probably going to pick him. I would love to see the Argos try and find a way to move up. And there are rumors that Calgary's interested in making a deal for that pick if the right deal comes about. I would like to see them make a move for that because I don't think Jordan Williams is going to be there at 2. Even if Calgary has no interest, and I actually think they kind of do. I think everyone does. Someone else will trade in. If it's not Calgary, it'll be someone else. Jordan Williams will be gone at 1. I would love to see Jordan Williams with the Argos.
Well, it speaks to how much Ottawa gave up to get their quarterback.
Yeah, for sure, because that's Ottawa's pick. You're right.
When to my conspiratorial belief that we got, that the Argos got caught. I it wouldn't surprise me if they thought Ottawa wouldn't trade that pick.
Yeah, and especially given that Ottawa had a prior relationship with Williams. Maybe that's something that the Argos were just saying, there's no way they're trading that pick up.
Yeah, I think it totally caught them by surprise that Ottawa, and I mean, I guess Ottawa loves him.
Yeah, well, again, that's not our problem.
No, we don't need to relitigate that debate. Sorry.
Williams is good. If you haven't seen Williams play, there's a ton of footage of him, even just on YouTube. You can find a lot of stuff on Williams. He hasn't played football in a year. He was playing at 230, and he just weighed in at 219 recently. So he's lost a little bit of weight. Looks terrific though. Like he's extremely fast, explosive. Doesn't miss tackles. I don't actually like the way he tackles, but he doesn't miss. He's very handsy and army with his tackles, even when he doesn't need to be. Not bad in coverage. That's definitely what he's going to have to work on most. The only thing I don't like really with his coverage is his zone coverage. When you watch him, he often finds himself just sort of floating in a zone, waiting for something to come to him instead of feeling himself pulled to nearby threats. His instincts and man are pretty good. Timing's good. But, he 4.4 at the Ontario Combine is pretty ridiculous for a guy that's 220 pounds.
His measurables are NFL quality.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
the only reason he's not getting looks is he's 5'11", and that's it. And which I think is foolish on the NFL's part.
And it's surprising too, because you look at the recent NFL draft. I mean, they are definitely dipping into CFL bodies.
For sure. Oh yeah.
The guys who are getting drafted in high rounds, they're calling them undersized linebackers, but I mean, they would never have been looked at their measurables at the linebacker position. The kind of linebacker box safety hybrid is definitely the rage right now.
Yeah, and I think one of two things. So if he's 2 inches taller, or if his coverage is a little bit more natural, then I think he's in the NFL. And I think those were just things they couldn't get past. NFL scouts couldn't get past. But again, all the better for us. He's an amazing player, and he's going to be awesome in the CFL. I would love that to be for the Argos. I think at the end of the day, he's going to be playing for the Stampeders. From 2 to 1 isn't a huge move, except in this case, because of that gap.
Right.
It is a more significant move than you would typically have.
It has to be. I mean, it would have to be a 2, right, or a 1 next year.
Yeah. Or players moving. That's a possibility too. And I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't rule that out. We do have 503 guys on our roster at the moment.
True.
So I don't know. Maybe there's someone that Calgary is interested in, but I think it's a long shot. So let's assume Williams goes 1 to Calgary or someone else. The next guy, the guy I want in the first round, if it's not going to be Williams, is the tackle out of Alberta, Carter O'Donnell. Now, there's a risk with him, and I'm not a huge fan of a risk with your second overall pick, your first round pick. But I love this guy. The risk is that he may catch on in the NFL. So the Colts picked him up as an undrafted free agent. I think he's worth the risk. First of all, I find very few undrafted free agents stick around. And I think being Canadian has a bit of a strike against him already. We've seen how hard it is. Even when they're better than their American counterparts, the Canadians tend to get overlooked. They tend to get dismissed by American coaches. And so even though he's with Indy, even though he's received a lot of high praise from NFL teams, I think, maybe it's going to be mid-season, but that's okay with me. I'm okay with it being half a season in to get this guy long-term. I would take Carter O'Donnell with that number 2 pick.
Well, and obviously in our current world situation, all of this is so murky. Will there be camp? Who knows?
Sure.
How any of this is going to work.
Watching film on him the last couple of days, I couldn't find anything that I didn't like about him. And he's only 21, which means he's like 2 years away from us truly seeing what he's got. He's really smart. He performs equally well against speed rushers, power guys, and run blocking, pass blocking. He just doesn't make mistakes. It's hard to trip him up. He picks up everything that you throw at him, and so that's a guy that I could see having a really long, successful career in the CFL. And so I think it's worth a gamble. And you know what? If he ends up catching on with Indy or someone else, well, so be it. We took a swing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting if that there's clearly 2 offensive linemen at the top that are appealing. I don't know if the fact that the kid from Buffalo,
Tomas, Jack Cardilla,
Cardilla, that he's more assured of not.
Well, he's definitely going to be in the CFL,
right? You don't have any. There's no messiness.
No, he would. He's and he's good. I'm not as high on him as everyone else is. Like you watch his film from Buffalo. That Buffalo was very, very run heavy, and he is a nice run blocker. But we're talking about the CFL. His pass blocking isn't great. Even his run blocking is weird. Like it's good, but what he does well is he turns people. Like you don't see him drive his guys downfield 10 yards. You see him get an angle, open a hole, turn a guy's body. And again, that's great. He is a good run blocker. But yeah, pass protection, he's okay. Like when he's in one-on-ones or double teams, he's fine. But he really struggles to see twists, stunts, delayed blitzes. He's always late on those. And he just hasn't had a lot of experience in a passing offense. Certainly not nearly as much passing as he would see in the CFL. And he's not a guy that's had any like positional versatility. He only played guard in Buffalo, so he's just going to be a guard. So that's not really like a 6th lineman that you'd like. He played a little bit of right tackle at Cégep in Montreal, but that's that's a whole different level. So I don't know. Is it worth it to get a guard that I'm so on? I like him. I don't think I like him as a first round pick, and I think he will be picked in the first round, like you were saying.
Well, just size wise alone.
And there's one thing he can do really well right away that So yeah, no, he'll go. I just don't. He's not for me, and maybe I'll be proven wrong. I often am, but I would rather take the risk with O'Donnell.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's the pick I would like too. I mean, I think that you can look to hit the safe pick, and that probably makes sense from a building point of view. But I think it's worth it to to take the risk, to take the guy who might really be dynamic.
So we move into round 2, and a guy that I'm hoping is still there, our man Jack Cassar from Carleton, linebacker. Both you and I have had an opportunity to coach Jack, and I think it would be awesome to see him land with the Argos.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be fantastic. I agree. Doing some research into what people are saying about him.
You and I actually saw him in grade 8.
Oh, playing
Yeah,
Warriors?
we saw him play Mississauga Warriors. I remember you and I going out to see a bunch of guys playing for the Warriors. We had a few guys at various different levels with in the OVFL with the Mississauga Warriors, and yeah, Jack was one of those guys that stood out just as a man in
Yeah,
grade
I mean,
8.
his obviously his size differential, but I think what's impressive about him is, he was a man amongst boys, in high school. But as that evens out, he didn't, it wasn't an issue of him then being washed out. He is.
No, he was a man amongst boys in university.
Yeah, I mean, he's gotten bigger too, but he is fast, and he's a killer. There's no two ways about it. I mean, he is looking to play violent football. I can't imagine that the coach, that a defensive coordinator wouldn't fall in love with him.
Oh, any DC would. He's 6'3", 230, so he's the size of a Mac. Maybe an edge rusher, but I think that's a bit of a waste. I'd love to see him as a Mac. Loves contact, extremely aggressive, great motor. And the thing I like about him too is that while he's really aggressive, his angles are good. Like, he doesn't get caught over pursuing. He doesn't get caught often, biting heavily on play action like a lot of those guys do that are, extremely aggressive linebackers. So without those failings, he's actually a really disciplined player, but a huge hitter. And you talk about wanting an attitude at linebacker, that's your guy.
Yeah, I mean, we're biased, obviously,
Yeah.
but I would love to see a local kid like Jack play for the Argos. I think that helps. I don't think that's not important to have some connections to the Toronto area with your talent.
And the Argos have done a pretty good job of that this offseason, bringing in guys that are from around here, whether it's, bringing back, Jamal Campbell from York, and, bringing in Breskison and, some of these other guys. It's great to have GTA, Southern Ontario born players playing for your football team.
I know. I'd love if we were picking 6.
You don't think he's going to slip?
Can we get him at 9? I think actually, I think there's a decent chance we might get him at 9.
Well, I'm going to make the argument to draft him at 9, and let's go with it. Like, even if he doesn't get a lot of playing time in his first year, he's a force on special teams.
Right.
And, would make an immediate impact there alone.
If you can draft a Canadian kid to play at linebacker who is going to be challenging for a starting position, I mean, I think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, agreed. So we look ahead to take a receiver. Now, in my dream world, Dejan Brissette is still there. You absolutely take him. 6'1", 195. Most recently at Virginia, played mostly at Richmond. This is O'Shea Brissette's brother, the Raptor. He'd be a great pickup because, first of all, he can play at this level. I wish he was a little bit faster, but to me, he moves a little bit like a 6'3" receiver. Like, he's just sort of got that taller receiver gait to him, even though he's 6'1", which is not that's small, but he runs around like a 6'3", 6'4" receiver, but he's terrific. He finds the ball immediately, tracks it without showing, has a really nice high point. And like I said before, the idea of getting more Canadian receivers starting, and I think he's, that caliber. I'd love to take him, but I think it's highly unlikely. But I've got a plan B if he's gone. You think there's any chance he's there?
I don't think so. I mean, I know, like, his measurables are good. They don't jump off. I don't think it's a particularly strong wide receiver draft. I think there are people who might look at at his production and go with somebody with a little less projection. So I think there's a shot. Yeah.
My backup, if he's not there, is Shafer Becker from Guelph. And he, to me, is, and I think you could even get him later, but I wouldn't want to risk it. Shafer Becker, I think, is definitely one of the best receivers in this class. I don't think he was able to really show it off at Guelph. He made some highlight reel catches that got a lot of attention, but he didn't really get consistent opportunities to showcase his abilities. No fault of his own. It just wasn't how they were set up. And so I think he is under the radar. He's a terrific route runner, amazing hands. He's 6'4", 200 pounds, high points like nobody I've seen. And he's a great human being too, a wonderful individual, great leader. I remember we were just talking about, watching Jack Cassar when he was young. I actually remember watching Shafer Becker when he was in grade 7. He was the shortest player on the team, but he stood out because he had this smooth stride, surprisingly crisp route running. And then the next time I saw him play, he was a foot and a half taller. I couldn't believe it was the same kid. But he still moved the same way. He still moved like a short receiver. He still had that change of direction and explosiveness. And, for 6'4", he runs a 4.6, is ridiculously strong, super cut. But, his 3-cone was outstanding. Short shuttle, like, again, measurables are really good. The only thing he doesn't have is a ton of tape. But I've seen him do it. I know that he can do it, and I'd put him up there in terms of potential with Breskison. And so that's not a player I want to risk trying to draft in rounds 4 through 8. I think if you can't get Brissette, you pick up Shafer Becker.
Yeah, I can totally get behind that. I mean, I would be excited. He's a local kid, and 6'4" is fantastic. I think that would be, obviously a great weapon.
He's so hard to cover. Again, having coached against him, he drove us absolutely crazy one year. We had him doubled and locked down, and he just kept coming down with these jump balls, these ridiculous catches. We did end up prevailing. I don't think we ever lost to any of Kean's teams, but he was the reason that they were in it every time.
Yeah, I could. For me, I'd love to see them double down on another offensive lineman. If they go offensive lineman, linebacker, offensive lineman, I like the idea of concentrating positionally. But I'm
fine with that too.
I wouldn't be sad if they went wide receiver, but I would love to see them go 2 offensive linemen in their first couple of picks.
I'd be fine with that too. And I think, like I said, you could risk leaving Kean till later on if you wanted to go that route.
Maybe you can steal him in the 4th, depending on what people think of him.
I think you probably could. It makes me nervous. Like if there's a guy that you want, and he's a guy that I think the Argos should want. I don't know if they do, but I don't know if you risk letting him go. And again, just Canadian receivers that you think can start, and I think he can. I just think you don't pass up on them. But you're right, though. Like offensive line is a need, and it starts getting a little thin for offensive linemen once we get into rounds 4 through 8. So, yeah, I could see them going that way too. I don't think I'd be upset with if they decided to take that path. So the next pick we have is that territorial pick, and it's fairly new. I guess last year was the first year that we did this, and the rule, if you're not familiar with the territorial pick, basically the first 2 teams to draft. So in this case, this year it's Ottawa and Toronto, first 2 on the waiver position, get to select a player that is from their region, sort of locally from their region. And so Toronto gets to take somebody that is, from the Toronto area with that territorial pick. And For me, I would like to see the Argos address the center position here with Jonathan Zamora from St. FX. You could probably risk waiting on Zamora, because I don't think there's not a lot of teams that are desperate for centers right now. I think Toronto probably has the biggest need at center. So I don't think there are going to be a ton of teams banging on Zamora's door in those first few rounds. So you could probably leave it. But I just think you've got this territorial pick right there. Use it on a guy that's going to come in and certainly challenge for that starting spot, an experienced center that is going to come in and contribute right away, or even if it's a year from now, that's fine too. Because we don't really have a lot of answers there. Like we got Ty Allen, Eric Starchala, maybe, who hasn't really played a lot of center, and Zamora is a center. He's done pretty much nothing else but play center at St. FX. Now I don't know how many St. FX games you've watched in the last 5 years. I do not watch a lot of FX games. I don't think I know anyone on that staff since Warren Goldie left a few years ago. But there's just not a lot of reason to watch St. FX play for me. But it was interesting going back and watching some film on him. Nothing flashy, but he's a solid center that doesn't make mistakes. And it reminds me actually a little bit of McEwen, who did really well with the Argos over the last few years. And why not pick up another guy like that? He's really quick to break off combo blocks, pick up delayed blitzes, stuns. He pulled a lot at FX, which you don't usually see a lot from CIS centers, but it speaks to his athleticism. It's really hard to get around. He's got this explosive burst and these deceptively long arms that really kind of catch defenders off guard. And you can see that he's in control of the offensive line out there. He is in command, not only on the line of scrimmage in the huddle, but on the sideline too. You see him addressing his guys and going over stuff. He, seems to be what you'd want in a center, a leader, and a good football player. So you've got that territorial pick. He's Toronto born. Let's use it there and pick up Jonathan Zamora, 6'3", 319 out of St. FX.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting combo, right? I'm sure there'll be people who will disagree with, with our selection of Jack at 9, and then going ahead with the territorial pick, because I mean, Jack would be a territorial candidate.
He would.
But I think Ottawa takes him. I think Ottawa takes him at 10.
Yeah. So let's take a look. So round 4 through 8, I've kind of put a few guys together that I'm interested in. With the targets that I've got here, I tried to pick one thing that I felt separated them from other people in the draft class. And, they've at least got this one thing that is elite. And, maybe we can, these are likely guys that are going to spend some time in the practice squad and spend some time developing. Maybe that's at least they've got something that you can build off of. And maybe you can start developing other areas of their game. Well, so one of the first guys I've got, defensive lineman from Laurier, Sam Champong. His first step is elite. I love watching his first step off the line. There's so many plays from this past season, especially, where he's through the offensive line before any of the other linemen are out of their stance, and that step is what you're drafting him for. He has some other issues to his game. He does have some problems when he gets squared up, when linemen engage him. He doesn't tend to shed that well, and he can be pushed around a little bit. He has this seems to have this habit of wanting to see what's going on in the backfield, and that leads to him getting very, very upright, and then he loses his leverage. But but that first step is spectacular. So if you can build off that, that's a player I'd like to see, and he's another local guy too. He's from Brampton, and so talking about another guy that we'd like from the area on the team. He'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're building our GTA All-Star team here.
Yeah, but I guess it's the guys we know better too. Like we both coached against him as well, and he was a difference maker at every level he's played at. But I think in terms of CFL, that first step belongs. Let's see if let's see if the Argos coaches can bring the rest of his game along.
Who I like is the kid from McGill, Andrew Sinnett Spalding is somebody that
Right.
I like for a couple of reasons. I think number one, I like taking players not necessarily from the powerhouse franchises all the time or the powerhouse schools, simply because I think that those schools are highly skilled. And obviously they have great players, and I'm not saying don't, take players from Laval and Western and so forth. But I think that I like a player who has come to national attention, that he won the JP Metra Trophy for the best defensive lineman, Adam McGill. He's undersized as a defensive lineman. He's only 6 feet tall. I just like a kid who's going to bring that. I mean, that if you have a kid playing for a school like, or playing for McGill who doesn't have off the chart measurables and is recognized, that's an engine. That's somebody who is the kind of player that I want on my team.
And I don't think you need to be 6'5" if you're going to be plugging up the middle, which is sort of what he does best. He's 300 pounds. He's a load. Like at 6 feet tall, that is a very tough man to move around. Yeah, no, I'd be happy taking a shot at him. I like a Champagne, but that's I'd be totally fine with a flyer there too. You know who else I like actually? If we're talking about defensive lineman, is Cameron Lawson out of Queens. He's another guy similar, a little bit taller, but he's 6'3", but 6'3", 290, I think. Pretty fast for his size. He moves quick laterally anyway. And, that's another guy that both you and I got to see. I actually have this visual of him when he was in his grade 12 year in high school. There were 3 guys that were 300 pounds on that team. And, of course, they're the first 3 guys off the bus. And oh my God, watching these guys come off the bus, and Cameron was one of those guys. Much different shape now. Like he was a really big guy, but you look at what 4 years of lifting weights at Queens has done to him. He's lost a little bit of weight, but he's just like massive in terms of strength. He's super strong, and he was even quick back then, but he's so fast now, side to side. He's got great technique. Uses his hands really well. He's really good at getting skinny too, and just finding his way through double teams. He holds his ground well too, even when he gets caught up. He's a guy that makes players around him look better by occupying 2 guys. Not getting pushed around in double teams, anchoring himself and opening up gaps for backers and stuff.
I think I think he's great too. I mean, it is always a little disheartening as a coach when you have to look up at the captain handshake. But I think that it is difficult to project a little bit because we don't know what the Argos defensive philosophy is going to be, really. 2 gappers, are they looking for guys who are going to get to the quarterback? I mean, those 2 kids we just mentioned, that's a 2 gapper set the edge style a defensive lineman. That's not a kid who's screaming to the quarterback. So it is an interesting philosophical question what they're looking for.
That's true, and we don't have that answer. Like we can try and guess by looking at some of the guys they've brought in. When you kind of look at Davis and Ollie and Bazzi, Rowe, some of those guys. I don't like. To me, that's going to look like a pretty much the same philosophical idea of the line that the Argos ran last year, but hopefully not actually resembling anything more than that. But we don't know until we see it. And like we said off the top of the show, that's not really a position of need. We just talked about these 3 straight D linemen that we like. Is that a position they're going to draft, or do they feel like they've already got a lot of pieces? Like it's a pretty deep defensive line without adding any pieces. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know whether they'll go scattershot or they'll just double down. I'm really curious to see. I mean, I'm looking forward to our post draft breakdown. I think there's a lot of interesting choices for a number of the teams as to where guys will go. I think where guys end up is going to be a lot more fluid than an American mock draft. I think that there's a lot more fluidity to what teams are looking for and how they're evaluating guys. So I would bet that there'll be some real surprises on Thursday.
And there always are. Like the CFL draft is awesome because you just can't mock it really. Like we try. They do a great job with it at 3 down, but it's an impossible task trying to figure out what these teams are thinking because there's just such range. But there's one more guy I want to talk about. I'm somewhat interested in Andrew Becker out of Regina. He's a center guard, and this is probably only if we miss on Zamora. If for some reason we're not going to go that route, if for some reason the Argos don't like Zamora or he gets picked before they planned on taking him, then Andrew Becker I'd be interested in taking a look at. He's 6'3", 300. He played more guard than center at Regina, but I don't think he has the mobility needed to be a CFL guard, but I think he does have the physicality and the intelligence to play center. He played a few games at center. And he looked really good. He's going to need a year to develop, and I don't know if that's the direction that the Argos want to go, or if they're going to draft a center, if they want a plug and play guy. But I'd be interested in him, and I think late rounds I expect him to be available in that 4 through 8 area. And so, if we do end up missing on Zamora, then I'd like to take a shot with Andrew Becker because I think he could be a really good player down the road.
Well, I guess I would give my final shout out to Liam O'Brien, a fullback for St. Mary's. If I were going to, cheer for somebody for us to pick a little bit later.
Are you going to sing the fight song?
No, I wasn't that kind of St. Mary's grad. But I guess somewhere inside me, I still pull for the Huskies and their large maroon football jackets. I love fullbacks. I think that fullbacks are not outdated. I think that it has swung around. I think that the fullback can be really a useful weapon. I'd love to see the Argos adopt a fullback into their regular rotation.
And even if he's someone like, that's a guy that can do more than just sort of your traditional hammer up the middle. Like you see the way they use Declan Cross. Even last year when nothing was working, Cross still made his share of awesome plays. Seabass another guy. Like we don't know what we've really got in Trayon Gray, and so adding a fullback I think makes perfect sense, and that's a position where you can find a Canadian.
It challenges teams. It challenges even at the highest level. It challenges rules where so much in football is about rules, especially defensively. And when you have a fullback lined up, or you're in an eye or an offset, if he can be a passing threat, it's always going to be a mismatch. They're just not going to have a defensive formation built to capture an athletic fullback. They're just not something teams prepare for on the reg because it's just not that common. So I would love to see them pick him and a little St. Mary's love.
So the next time we get together, we'll discuss how the Argos didn't take any of the guys that we mentioned today, because that is the nature of the CFL draft.
Come on, Pinball.
As he said, I know. We're always hoping he's listening, but I feel pretty good about everyone that we brought up today. I feel can be a contributor, and we just have to wait and see, because obviously the Argos are going to be going into this feeling really good about their guys, about the guys they have on their big board, and that's the fun of the CFL draft, is that you really don't know. So I'm pretty excited about watching on Thursday. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll tweet along with it as it goes.
And I think they're going to get ratings. it's an empty. I mean, it's the only show in town.
Yeah, well, you saw the ratings the NFL draft got. Like day 3. Day 3 was is like rated like the Oscars.
Yeah, I mean, people are starving for some form of live professional sports. So I think I'm excited to watch it. I'm excited for the heat of more people watching than normal, and
Yeah.
we can come back and explain how everybody did it wrong.
Yep, and that's what we'll do. Well, that will just about do it for us today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and tell all your Argo fan buddies about us. For JB, I'm Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones.
Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight